Well, good morning. It's Friday already. And for many of you, that means it's the last day of the work week. When you work for yourself, it's just another day. But I'm here this morning not to talk to you right this minute about insurance, kind of talking to you about assurance. And I wanted to come to you this morning. I don't think I've done this before on this one, but if I have, just say, well, bless his heart, he don't remember. But I was recently made aware of my wife's church is starting a study in the book of Ruth, and I asked her about it, and she said, well, I said, how much of the first chapter did it cover? And she says, well, just a little bit of it. And so I went back and listened to the recording, and I noticed that they skipped, to me, a very important part of the study of the book of Ruth. And that takes place just in the first 2 or 3 verses of chapter 1. Now, I have the King James Version here in front of me because I have my Crossfire Bible from Swaggart. So let's start in chapter 1, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled. Now we know Judges is the book right before Ruth. So we're not sure in which time frame which judge was at that time, but we do know it was in the time frame of the book of Judges. That there was a famine in the land. Now, famines in the Old Testament many times was sent by the Lord as a judgment of the spiritual, decline. And more than likely, that's what was happening here. So there was a famine going on there in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah. Now, that says a lot right there. The Bethlehem, Judah. Bethlehem means the house of bread. And Jesus said that he is the bread of life. Judah is praise. So we have the man that lived in the house of bread in praise, and he went to sojourn. In other words, he decided to move out of Bethlehem, Judah, and sojourn into the country of Moab. He and his wife and his 2 sons. Now, this is often overlooked because they're just actually getting into more studying and everything, but you really got to understand, God had told the Israelites to have nothing to do with the Moabites. Do not go into their land, do not have anything to do with their people, have nothing to do with the Moabites. But what do we find? We find a man out of Bethlehem, the house of bread in the nation of praise, decides because he's having a tough time, he's going to go to the nation of Moab that God has told him to stay away from. Now, many of us are just like him. We're just like the man there is Elimelech, and we have a hard time. So what we do, we start facing a time of judgment. We're all imperfect. There's not a perfect one of you out there. I don't care if you raise your hand, so I'm perfect. Then I say, oops, no, you're not, because you just told a lie. But there's none of us that perfect. But Elimelech was facing judgment, so he says, well, I'm not going through this, so I'm going to go down to Moab, where God has told us not to go. Many of us go through troubles and trials, and what do? We try to get out of it, and we go exactly to where God has told us not to be. You go into troubles, you turn to Moab, the bottle. You start drinking. You turn into Moab, the drugs. You start using drugs. You start using pornography. You start using things that God told you to stay away from. But that's the only way I can settle my nerves. No, you're going to have to learn that you cannot go to Moab. Whatever it is that God says for you to stay away from, you need to stay away from. But here we go. Elimelech takes his wife and his 2 sons. And the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi. And the name of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Epaphrodites, and Bethlehem of Judah. And they came into the country of Moab and continued there. They lived there. Then what happens? Verse 3. And Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, dies there. He dies away from the house of bread and praise, because he thought it was better to go into Moab. So he dies there and is buried there. And she was left with her 2 sons. That's all she had left. She was living in Moab because her husband brought her there. And now all she had left was her 2 sons. And the 2 sons not only lived in Moab, but they married Moabite women, which again was something else that God told them not to do. So they married 2 Moabite women. And lo and behold, what happens? The 2 sons die. Folks, when you turn away from God and start living in Moab, whatever it might be, your alcohol, your drugs, your pornography, whatever it is, when you turn away from God and lived there long enough and said, I'm staying up roots, matter of fact, I'm going to marry what you told me not to marry. And the 2 sons died and was buried there. And Naomi is left with 2 Moabite women. Doesn't know what to do. So she decides in herself, I'm going back to Bethlehem. Basically, she was saying, I'm repenting. I'm turning around, heading back. Now, you ladies, Orpah, it's not it's not Oprah. I've had several people tell me, that's Oprah. No, it's Orpah. They're about the same, Moabite. But anyway, that's a different story. Anyway, and we find Orpah and Ruth. And she says, you ladies, you need to go back to your towns. You can find yourself Moabite men to marry you and take care of you. And Orpah says, sounds good to me. But Ruth that, no, I'm not leaving you. I'm going to go with you. Your people is going to be my people. Your God to be my God. Naomi had decided to go back to Bethlehem. And in so doing, she won over Ruth to travel with her. You see, don't allow yourself to travel to Moab. It's a place of death. If you find yourself in Moab today, be a Naomi. Turn around and say, I'm going back to Bethlehem. Going back to Bethlehem. The house of bread. The house, the town where Jesus was born. The bread of life. So I hope you see today why I said this particular part of the chapter is so important. It sets up the whole rest of the book. So I hope you got something from this today. Let me know if you did. I do appreciate it. And God bless you.